Amy, and I'm from Authors Buzz, and I'm here again with Tabitha. Hopefully you are becoming besties with her just like I am, and we are continuing our discussion about beta readers. We talked about what they are, how to choose good beta readers, and what to ask them to look for when they're reading your manuscript. And now you've gotten back feedback, and we're going to talk about what you do with the feedback you've gotten from your beta readers.
Well, first, you open a big bottle of wine or a glass of something that can help you relax. But that's really, I mean, you don't have to drink yourself silly, but you do need to get yourself in a place where you can receive feedback. And that isn't always easy. So I do suggest leaving some time. And naturally, it's going to take your beta readers a little bit of time to get through your manuscript and create the notes and get them back to you. So that automatically puts a stop between when you've finished and thank God I finished it. Everything is out on the page. I've unloaded my soul. And it puts a little buffer in between when you get back 90 pages of red ink, right? Or just, these notes.
I do have, just for everyone, if you're brand new and you sent your book out and you got some feedback that was anything less than glowing, I just have a quick story. A mutual friend of Tabitha and mine, I gave him a screenplay years ago because he's in the industry, and he gave me great notes. I opened up that thing and I was like, he doesn't like it. And I closed it. I didn't make a single correction. I didn't do anything. And years later, I saw Paul, and he's like, hey, like, what was that screenplay? I was like, I don't know. I just wanted you to like it. He's like, Amy, the reason I took the time with it was because I thought you had something. I thought there was something good there, and I was trying to help you make it better. If I thought it sucked, I would have found a nice way of saying that instead of spending all that time. So anyway, quick story. Back to now you've gotten your emails back with your notes.
Right. And so you have notes. That's a good thing. And I would say, so now you're in a place where, you've fortified yourself and you're like, this is for my improvement. It's only going to make my story better. I do need to know this. These are the things I tell myself. So the things I look for, if you hear something more than once, take it seriously, because if multiple people have responded the same way to an issue in your manuscript, it's an issue in your manuscript, whether you think it's one or not. It is for your readers. So you need to take that. Like I mentioned many times, I had a character people did not resonate with. I really had to take that feedback and go back and create him in a way that people would respond the way I intended versus the way he came across. So anything you hear more than once is probably got some merit to it. Another thing I think about is sometimes you already know there's a problem somewhere and you just ignored it and sent it out anyway and thought maybe people won't think it's a problem. Am I right?
Hiding it under the bed, absolutely.
Yep.
Or or sometimes you have a sense, and a lot of times that's what they call the muddle of the middle, like those middle chapters where you need to keep the tension going, but it's kind of tricky, and maybe you put in some sideways loops or whatever, and just something isn't sitting right. And so when you get the feedback back, you're like,
I know. I sent off the second book in my sci-fi trilogy, to my editor. It had gone through beta readers, and they kind of identified this a little bit, but it wasn't, a professional editor knew. And she was like, your first 3 chapters really suck. And I was like, I know they did. I know it. And she's like, she's like, the rest of the story moves really quickly, but think about how you opened your first book. You opened it with a spaceship crashing and a woman connecting empathically with the whole crew and realizing that these people are not from her world. Like, it was an exciting opening scene. The second book opened with, transmission from the father to the son, recapping the whole thing that had happened in the first book. And I was like, I know.
That's how you did that's how you gave them, you caught the readers up.
Yeah. And then that was totally like snooze fest, right? And I knew it. Like, I just was like, oh, this is a little dull, but maybe people will want that. And
I've already read the first one.
Right. So I had to go back in and completely rewrite the first 3 chapters. And I did. I created an action scene for the opening. It was much more rapid pacing and just more interesting, and got the reader sucked back in. That happened again. I sent off book 3 in that trilogy. I had one little area that I just couldn't figure out how to get that to that, and so I just did that to that, and I just glossed over it. But it was a little bit important, and I knew it, and I sent it off, and I just was, got the same feedback. What's going on here? Question mark, question mark. They're like, ah. So again, if you know that something is wrong and people point it out, you need to fix it, right? So you've got the things people say more than once, the stuff you already know isn't working. And I would say, the third thing is, like, we all have habits, right? So, and we have writing habits. And as we continue to write, those bad habits should start to go away, but sometimes they still don't. And that is where a good beta reader will remind you of those bad habits. One of my beta readers wrote back and said, "You said thank you 90 times in this manuscript." And I was like, oh God, I did?
Is that Ron?
It was Ron. Of course it was Ron.
Ron is a friend of ours. I feel like he would count.
He did it, put it in his little thing and gave me the number. And it was like 95 times or something like that. Your character said thank you. Now,
he's like, people are not that polite.
No, but a bigger note about that, and this is where, when he and I had the conversation afterwards and we were talking about the manuscript, he said, when they're all talking the same, your character's individual voices aren't coming out strongly enough. So if everybody is polite in this way, or is, there's buzzwords, or your character's voices aren't distinguished enough. And that was a great note, because, it wasn't about how many times I said thank you. It was actually about character voice, that there wasn't enough distinction between the characters to make them.
I get that. I start doing that in my second run through, before I even send it out. That's where I start distinguishing voice and making sure, or trying to make sure, everything that individual says throughout the novel matches the way that they would say it. And you're going to miss some of those things too, because when you first do it, you're just kind of getting the bones down of the conversation, and you're not necessarily getting all of their vocabulary or having it be natural enough.
Right. And Amy gave me a great note about my urban fantasy. And it was essentially, your main character talks more like you. You need to make her talk more like your sister. And now, you people that are on here probably don't know my sister.
Don't swear, but give them a little.
She's just a bit edgier and a little bit less, she's not going to say thank you a million times in the manuscript. She's got that, like, hello, come on. She's just got a more blunt and funny, but edgy humor. And, that was a great note. It's not like I was writing the character to be my sister or meet myself or anything like that, but just to say that voice, it's not my voice. It can't sound like my voice. She's so different than me. So it was a really good note. So those kinds of things that, character notes, pacing notes. So in the last episode of this podcast, we went over what questions to ask your beta reader. So now when you're reviewing those questions, you're going to pull that information into your editing plan, but you're going to use those tips on, like, did you hear it more than once? Does it resonate already with you? Are you hitting some of your bad habits? Are your characters, some of them not, coming across the way you intend for them to? Those are things you want to take seriously and bring into your round of edits.
Yeah, and then also there's something really beautiful that happens as you're getting these edits and working through them and reworking your manuscript, is you're learning. Mm-hmm. So all of these notes are kind of going into your hard drive of writer, and they honestly help make you better. Where as you're writing, you're like, oh, I'm bored, I can't do this, or you start doing more of those things actively when you begin a new manuscript.
You do. You internalize. You hear your beta readers like little angel and devil on your shoulders, right? Saying, are you, is this bad habit coming out again? Have you said thank you 900 times, or whatever? And like, you start to hear those voices and you internalize that. And the next, manuscript that you deliver will have a different, it'll level up a bit, even if you still have some developmental things to work through, you do level up every time you go through this process. So it's a really worthy process. to go through and to hear and think of it this way. You have an opportunity to correct these things before you're really putting it out there in the world, because you want the reader experience to be really good so that they come back for more of more of your stories, more of the tales you want to tell, and they're not put off by some bad habit you have or whatever, so.
And also you want to honor, I mean, you put your lifeblood into this story because it was something that was important to you. So you want to honor that story by telling it the best that you possibly can.
Absolutely. And when you finish sort of sifting through the feedback and you've put the little bit of space that you needed to, so you're receiving it in that way, then you need to take a little bit of time after that to let it internalize and percolate and allow the creative process to start up again. And it will start to happen. You'll start to think of solutions for these things, and then you'll get excited about it all over again, and you'll want to dig in and make those changes and turn it into a better book. And that, for me, there's always the moment where you're like, oh God, I don't know how I'm ever going to get it from there to here. But just like when you were on the, word 25,000 and you have to get to 90, you're like, God, am I ever going to get there? You do, right? So you will in this process as well. And you'll be like thrilled that it's such a better book than the one you started with.
Right. And so I assume we'll on another time, are we going to talk about ways to do that? Because a lot of times it's simpler than you at first think. And I know we discussed that personally before. Yes. You're super intimidated to start with, but as you give it that few nights rest and you let your unconscious mind do its magic, and maybe like the spirits of the writer people or angels or whoever else is around, you start seeing like, oh, I could just do this. Like, it's like simple. So I guess we'll save that.
Oh, I have lots of plans for editing. I can share it another time.
Excellent. Thank you for joining us, Tabitha. And thank you to everyone who's listening. And we so care about you making this dream that you have to write a book the very best it can be.